Welcome back to another edition of Crafting for Fun. Today I'm going to show you how to make this fun autumn card using your scraps of fall colored papers plus a die from the Spellbinders pumpkin nesting die set. This card is quick and easy to make and not nearly as complicated as it looks. I will show you a little bit of difference between two of the cards that I made. These cards look very similar. Of course, they're made using different patterns of paper. But this card, if you look at it, the pieces are textured. The solid color pieces are textured. Of course, the pattern papers are not. But there is no faux stitching on this card. On this card, I've used a series of solid and patterned papers, but if I move in very closely, you'll see that I added some faux stitching detail along the edge using a paper piercer. So both of these cards I think are lovely. They're just a little bit different. So if you have the patience and the time, grab your paper piercer after you make your card and add a little faux stitching detail. I'll be showing you how to complete the rest of the card. Of course, you'll want to do that faux stitching before you glue this pumpkin layer down to the vanilla layer. So you'll just want to, if you are interested in adding faux stitching, you'll want to do it before you secure your pumpkin in place. So let me gather my supplies and I'll show you what you need to make this project. To create today's project, you'll need the following items. You'll need a piece of cardstock for your card base. This piece measures 5 1/4 by 10 1/2 inches, and it has been scored at 5 1/4 in the middle. When I fold it, I get a 5 1/4 by 5 1/4 inch base card, and this will fit in a 5 1/2 by 5 1/2 envelope. You'll need some pieces to create your layers. I have a piece of pumpkin pie colored cardstock here that measures 4 3/4 by 4 3/4. I have a piece of vanilla cardstock that measures 4 1/4 by 4 1/4 that will layer on top of that. And then I have a whole bunch of scraps here. I have some solids and some prints, and the only thing that these have in common is that they're all nice fall colors, and every single one of them has been cut to 1 1/2 inches wide. The lengths may vary a bit, but the widths are all 1 1/2 inches wide, and that's just a size that I decided to work with. You might decide to work with another size. In addition to that, I'm going to be using my Cuttlebug machine, or you could use a Big Shot, and some embossing folders. I have the Perfect Polka Dots embossing folder, I have a herringbone embossing folder, and I have a honeycomb embossing folder. But any embossing folders you have that have nice tight small prints would work. And like I said, you will need an embossing machine. I'm going to be using some buttons, and I'm going to be using some linen thread. I'm going to be using one button actually, and some linen thread to make a bow, and some adhesive. Of course, you'll need a sentiment stamp and some ink, and you'll need a die. And for the project today, I'm going to be using this die. This is the Spellbinders Nesting Pumpkin Die. It's from the Spellbinders Nesting Pumpkin Die set, and this is the largest of the pumpkins in that set. So let me get set up here, and I'll show you how to make today's project. Okay, I'm ready to get started with my card. And what I did was I just grabbed a regular piece of notebook paper and tore it in half. If you don't have notebook paper handy, copy paper will work, or even a scrap of cardstock. You just need something to anchor your pieces to until you're ready to cut them. And before I got started, I decided I wanted to use these 3 print pieces and these 3 solid color pieces. And so what I did was I ran each through my Cuttlebug with an embossing folder and put a little texture on them. So I have a herringbone on this, Perfect Polka Dots here, and a honeycomb pattern on this one. So what I'm going to do now is and I've already got some adhesive on the back of this piece. I'm going to add a little bit more. So you want to generously cover the back of your piece with adhesive. And I'm just going to lay down my first piece. Now, I want to create a patchwork pattern, and I need to make sure that my patchwork quilt, if you will, is large enough in the end so that I can cut my pumpkin out of it. But I don't actually have to have it be in a pumpkin shape yet. So what I'm going to do next is grab another one of my pieces, and I guess I'll grab this herringbone piece next, and I'm going to put adhesive all along the back of it. And you do want to generously cover the back of your pieces with tape. And I'm going to go directly under that and line it up to where the edges are butted as close together as possible and smooth that down. Now my next piece, this is going to be kind of in the center of my pumpkin. I want them to be offset a little bit. I don't want perfect rows of pieces. I want it to be more like a patchwork quilt where they're going to be a little offset from each other, and I'm trying to get down as close as I can to that corner. So I'm going to just lay my next piece on, and this will all make more sense to you when you see how I'm going to cut this. And I'm going to take my brown piece next and kind of put that in. Now I've done the two solids on the top in both of those, and that was quite by accident. So for the next one, I'm going to do a solid on top and a print on the bottom. So next I'm going to go, and I don't like this actually because, well, it's okay. I'll leave that on there. Now I'm going to go with my next piece, my solid. Put a good amount of glue on the back, and if you have any places where it's not a perfect line, you can actually overlap them slightly to create a more perfect line, which is exactly what I'm going to do here. I'm going to cheat a little bit, but that's the reason why I cut all of my pieces at 1.5 inches, is so I could get nice straight lines. And now I'm going to take my last piece, my print, put adhesive on the back. And again, being mindful to line that up exactly underneath my piece on top, even though it overlaps a little bit. There we go. And now I have kind of a patchwork look. Now if I take my die and put it on top, you'll see I can adjust, and I can have larger amounts of my solids or my prints showing. I think I'm just going to go for kind of an equal amount showing there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this this cutting board and move it aside and bring in my Cuttlebug. Pardon me. So I have my A plate on my Cuttlebug down and my B plate. And obviously I don't need the part that's extending off the paper there, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that just to make it easier to roll it through. Now I could take my scissors and cut this, but we all know that your fingers work just as well. And I'm just going to lay my die on there, again being mindful of my pattern. Put the lid on, and I'm going to roll it through. So I have an A plate, a B plate, and a C plate in this case because I have a thin die. Now I am actually rolling it back because I'm going through more than one layer of paper here. I'm going through actually the notebook paper and all of those layers of cardstock. And so when I take it out, you'll see the notebook paper was just a liner for all of these pieces. So I have that pumpkin there. Before I completely put this die away, I am going to take a scrap of brown cardstock, and this is actually just an offcut from the last time I cut a pumpkin shape out. I'm going to put a B plate down, and I just want the very stem on this pumpkin, and I'm going to make my pumpkin stem a brown color, and I'm going to put the C plate on top and roll it through. And we'll come back to this piece here in a moment. And I actually don't need the sides. I just need this, and I'm going to trim it a little bit. So I'm going to set this machine aside and my die, and I'll get set up and show you how we're going to finish this card off. Okay, I'm back, and I have brought back my card base and my layers. Before I go ahead and start layering things together, I'm going to go ahead and stamp my sentiment. So I have my white or my vanilla piece for the front of my card here, and I'm grabbing my stamp, sentiment stamp, and my ink. I'm using Early Espresso ink, and this stamp just says just because, and I really like the font. So I'm going to stamp it. It's a long skinny stamp, and I'm going to stamp it as close to the bottom of this vanilla cardstock as I can. So there we go. I just love that font. Show you that there. Okay. So now I'm going to set my ink and my stamp pad aside, and I'm going to begin layering things together. I'm going to go ahead and layer my vanilla cardstock on top of my pumpkin pie cardstock. And I've designed this to have a 1/4 inch border all the way around, not an 1/8 of an inch. If you cut your layers so that they're only a 1/4 of an inch different from each other, you get an 1/8 of an inch on each side. This was cut a 1/2 an inch in on each layer, so I get a full 1/4 of an inch. So now I'm going to go ahead and put this layer on the front of my card. It's important to take your base card, fold it in half, and then burnish that crease well with a bone folder. So now I'm going to take this layer and I'm just going to center it up on here. And I'm going to be adding that pumpkin, but what I want to do first is I want to take this little piece that I did for the stem, and it was cut straight across because the paper that I used, and I'm just adding a little jig-jaggy bottom, jig-jaggy little bottom on that piece, and I just cut that by hand. You can cut your bottom of your pumpkin stem whatever shape you like. Part of it will actually be hidden. So I'm just going to add that, and now I'm ready to turn that over, and I could use pop dots or adhesive. In this case right now, let me see, do I have any pop dots handy? Yes, I do. So I think I will pop it up. I'm going to add a generous number of dimensionals. And this will just give the card a little more depth. If you don't have dimensionals, well, just glue it directly to your card. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the backs from those. Now that seems like this pumpkin would be very thick, but I was using paperweight patterns, and it's simply glued on a piece of notebook paper, so this pumpkin is actually not very thick at all. The areas that are solid color cardstock are a little heavier, but in general this is not real thick. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to my card, and I'm just going to center that over my sentiment. And now I am going to, let me see what I did with those leaves here. Whoops, pardon me. I actually had some leaves left over from a previous project. Let me grab those and we'll finish this card up. Okay, I grabbed a couple of leaves that I had left over from my autumn wreath project that I demonstrated a couple of weeks back. And so I'm going to use those to embellish this project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add adhesive, just regular mono adhesive, to the back of one of my leaves. I'm going to go ahead and just adhere it in place. Then I'm going to take the other one and I'm going to turn it over, and I'm going to add just a piece of a foam pop dot on there. So just a little piece, and I'm going to go ahead and peel the backing off and stick that in place. Stick those both down. And now I want to use a little bit of linen thread. You could use whatever kind of thread or twine you have at your house. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. And I'm going to tie a little bow. And I like to leave it attached to the actual spool, if you will, until I get the whole bow tied. That way, if I don't like it and I decide to pull it all out and start over, I haven't actually committed to a certain length of string. And I'm going to cut off the little extra there, and I'm going to set that down. So I'm finished with that, and I'm going to grab a button. Now I have some little buttons that I bought at my local Hobby Lobby, and I'm just going to select one of those, and I'm going to add both of those to my card using glue dots. So I have some micro glue dots here, and I'm just going to take that button and actually stick a couple of glue dots on the back. maybe one more. And so I'm going to add my button there. And then I'm going to take my bow and I'm going to actually grab a glue dot on the end of my scissors and attach that to the back of this bow. These really tiny micro glue dots work really well for stuff like this. And I'm just gonna, I may need another one. Oh, well, it's because the glue dot is actually still stuck on my scissors. There we go. So I'm just going to add that to my card there. And now I just want to add a liner to this card. So what I did was use my same pumpkin die and a scrap of vanilla cardstock, and I cut a shaped piece to use as my liner for the inside of this card. So I'm just going to go ahead and open it up and add that to the center. That is a quick and easy card. I hope you enjoyed today's project. If you have any questions, please email me at craftingforfun@gmail.com or check out my blog for other craft projects.